Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. From Boundary to Bear Lake, Fremont to Payette, Oahe to Oneida, there are interesting people, places, and histories in all of Idaho's counties. And Idaho Matters wants to share it with you with stories from all 44 counties that make up the Gem State. Email your ideas to idahomatters@boisestate.edu or use the Talk to Us feature in our app, available on Apple and Android, and tune in each weekday at noon for Idaho Matters.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Gemma Gaudette. It's Idaho Matters, and it's Friday. That means it's time for our Reporter Roundtable, when we get you up to date on all the news that made headlines this past week. And today, our panel includes Drew Dodson, reporter and editor for the Valley Lookout, Emma Epperly with Idaho Education News, and Alex Brzee with the Idaho Statesman. And I want to point out that all of the reporters on our Reporter Roundtable donate their time, a lot of their time, to be on the show. We want to thank them, all of them, throughout the year. That said, Drew, hi. Happy Friday.
Good morning. How are you? Good afternoon, actually.
It's so
Just
close.
over, huh?
I know. It's so close when we start the show. You never know.
Yeah.
I want to start with an update on the rock fire. We talked about this last week. Remind us where this is burning, because people maybe who don't pay attention in the summer will pay attention in the winter when they're skiing. Tell me about where it's at.
Yeah, that's a nice hint. It's so the rock fire started on August 12th, about a mile and a half south of Tamarack Resort, kind of on the ridge line there of West Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually a couple of different fires that started during a thunderstorm that night that have since merged into one that's known as the Rock Fire, and it's pretty well burned up to the Tamarack ski area boundary, that southern boundary. You might know it as the ski run Upper Bliss. It's the fire's at 2,813 acres as of this morning, which, if that sounds bad, okay, but there is some good news in that, and that's that. In the first 24 hours after it ignited on August 12th, the fire was up to like 1,900 acres.
Yeah.
And so really we've seen about 2/3 of the growth of this fire all within the first day, essentially. And so that's kind of heartening when you look at it from that perspective, about 900 acres of growth over the last 9 days or so.
We've had a lot of people who have responded to this. I know there was a community meeting last night. Did we learn anything new about the fire at the meeting?
There was a couple big takeaways for me from last night's meeting. It was here in Donnelly at the fire station. One of the big takeaways was that so the total perimeter on this fire at this point is 33 miles. And there are, as of this morning, 884 personnel working on this fire, and to this point, there has been fire line constructed around about 31 and a half miles. So 95% plus of this fire has containment lines around it. Now, that being said, containment is still at 0%. And that's because of the type of fuels it's burning in. It's a lot of it's subalpine fir, and it'll really burn hot and intense and throw sparks and embers, and that can actually kind of jump containment lines. And so that's why we still see that containment figure lingering at 0. But what we do know is, and this was kind of the money quote, if you will. This is a little sneak peek. I'm publishing this story this afternoon. I'm in the process of working on it now. But fire managers are kind of viewing this weekend as kind of the telltale, of what's going to happen. We've got these 31 and a half miles of defensible lines that have been built over the last, 8, 9, 10 days. And we've got, really hot and dry weather on the way today and tomorrow before some cooling temperatures and moisture come in next week. And so, we're gonna see what happens this weekend. It's the next couple days are big.
You mentioned the 884 number. I saw that too. It's almost 1,000 people who are working on this fire. And when it gets up to those numbers, you can sort of guess that's a big deal. Um, we've also talked about the smoke that has come and gone throughout the fire. How is the community doing up there? You've got all these people up there. You've got summer recreation time, and you've got a fire.
Well, I think, as is always the case, it's a range of emotions, right? There's frustration, there's gratitude, there's fear, there's
Mm.
concern, there's bad memories of years past. There's, these it's something we all live through up here. You take the good with the bad, and I don't think anybody relishes this time of the year, especially I can tell you today. The smoke is quite bad, maybe the worst I've seen
Mm.
this summer. Certainly not ever, but certainly this summer. I live here in downtown Donnelly, and I can normally see West Mountain pretty clearly out my window, and today it's not there. It's
Mm.
just haze, just smoke today. Um, and of course, you see the fire camp down there off Warm Lake Road near Cascade, and you see the vehicles and you see the personnel. There's certainly an economic impact associated with that. The incident commander last night at the community meeting mentioned, he was kind of joking around that down in Cascade at Thunder Mountain Burgers, a popular place to eat, they must know him by name by now because he's in there all the time, not only this year, but even in years past on different fires. And so there's a relationship that exists in Valley County with firefighters that goes beyond, any one fire. It goes beyond the rock fire. It's a year-to-year thing, and it's something we're all used to up here. And like I said, there's still different emotions that come along with that, but it's kind of almost business as usual for late August, right?
Right. Oh man. Okay. Well, we'll wait and see, and we'll look for your story this afternoon on the Valley Lookout. Alex, you have got a very extensive timeline of the Brian Koberger case. I was looking at it this morning again, and wow, this is everything from start to finish. It's not quite finished.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you laid out the story?
Yeah. So I guess first off, I just want to say that I did this story with my coworker, Kevin Fixler, and honestly, my editor, Hayat Normini, was they were just extensive in helping with this. So it was definitely a team effort. But yeah, we kind of, once we got all the records and everything that's been recently released in the Koberger case, we knew that we kind of wanted to have a story that tried to like tell everything that happened and from start to finish. And also, one of the things when we're looking through the records is just kind of seeing all the little things that the police, especially local law enforcement, did that, like leads that they had to check out that
Mm.
really led nowhere, but, was part of, the work they had to do to, make sure they were on the right track. So yeah, we started from the very beginning, when the initial officers responded to the house off the campus of U of I in Moscow. And, it's kind of starting with that initial call that they thought that maybe a, young woman had been passed out or having some kind of medical emergency, to obviously realizing that it was a quadruple homicide, and kind of walking through, when one of the main detectives on the case, Brett Payne, when he kind of walked through the house and he spotted the knife sheath that would kind of become critical in the case. And that's kind of was our, I don't know if you noticed that with the story, but our kind of intent with the story was to try to follow the knife sheath throughout
Mm-hmm.
and kind of that was kind of the thing that led to Koberger pleading guilty because it was the piece of evidence. And so we kind of walked through that piece, from finding it to sending it down to Meridian. They actually went down the next day, and it was actually, I think it was some ISP troopers that went down, like drove it down themselves, hand delivered it to the crime lab
Oh wow.
to test it for DNA. And I think it was 1 week later they found the DNA on it, but they didn't know who it was or anything. They ran it through the normal systems like CODIS and didn't come back with anything. Then they had another officer fly it himself in a backpack that he went through the Boise airport, all the way down, I think, to Texas, to Oxfam labs. And they started doing the genetic genealogy testing to try to see if they could find some connection to who the DNA belonged to. that ended up kind of getting cut off part of the way through with the FBI helping, and then they finally landed on Koberger. And even kind of we walked through, the first interview with him with the local law enforcement here in Idaho, and then obviously ending with the most recent update with him taking a plea deal and being sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. So it's a long story.
It is, and you go step by step through the case. As you said, you put in all that evidence that's been uncovered, that with all those records, and we know Idaho police have been very focused on this case. Has it kind of taken over your life, reporting on this? I know a lot of people have been watching it closely.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it really has most recently. When the case actually, I remember where I was when I got the notification, because I went to U of I and I still had vandal alerts on my phone from being a breaking news reporter, and also just I still had friends that were finishing school up there. I was actually on my way to Seattle to visit my college best friend, and I got the notification, saying that they were investigating some kind of incident, and obviously didn't know what it was at the time. So I was on vacation when it first happened, and it was hard to be on vacation, just knowing once we started learning the details of what happened. But the initial kind of years, I was involved definitely, but I wasn't, I would say, a huge part of our initial coverage. My coworker Kevin has really been the one who's mainly led things, and also my coworker Angela, who I actually went to school with, kind of led some of our initial coverage, because her significant other was still living in Moscow at the time, so she was able to go up there pretty easily. But definitely in the last year, I'd say it's really taken over, my normal coverage of stuff. Having to put aside other stories to work on this, and we were all ready to spend the next 3 months in court every day covering things. That was kind of the plan. I would have to put aside my normal crime coverage to take on this case with my coworkers. And obviously that's kind of changed now, but we're still obviously dealing with a lot of stories, and, we're, I think, slowly but surely kind of coming to the end of it. So,
but it's not over yet, because you recently reported on a possible leak of footage of Koberger in prison. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so there was it's just kind of found online. I honestly, the first place I saw it was a Reddit page, but it was all over social media. I mean, news outlets started reporting on it. It's just been everywhere, and it's what appears to be, someone with their phone kind of taking footage from on a computer screen, possibly like surveillance footage of Koberger, what appears to be a prison cell. We're still kind of like waiting for confirmation to know for sure that it was at the prison. But both the Ada County Jail and the Latah County Jail, where Koberger also was incarcerated, have denied that it's at their facility, and said, they can confirm that's not their place. So our thinking is that it's coming from the Department of Corrections, but we're kind of still in the initial confirmation. And it's really mundane footage. It's him, appearing to walk across his cell. I think his hands look a little red, and he's cleaning a shoe. Like, it's not anything really of interest.
Right. And we don't know if it's real. We don't know if it's a fake.
Yeah.
And if it is real, what does that say about security wherever it was taken?
Yeah. Yeah. So, the Department of Correction did come out with a statement, and, they kind of said, that they're looking into it. Obviously, they're going to take this very seriously. They did warn everyone, that they're still looking into it, and, that the image itself, the video itself, could be fake or enhanced through AI. So they haven't confirmed fully that it's in their facility, but they did say they're looking into it. But yeah, there's a concern about, the safety and security. A local defense attorney that I spoke to called this a massive breach. And even the department itself, said that if proven to be true, that, they're going to take this very seriously. It's a clear violation of their policies. Staff can have phones on them, but they are not allowed to videotape and share security footage, especially within the maximum prison, because it's our most secure prison. And they said that, depending on what they find, obviously, if they find that this actually happened and it was someone, within the department, they're going to look into it, and it's possible that could lead to termination or even criminal charges.
Wow. And that defense attorney you quoted also said there's a lot of hatred and venom against Koberger, which I guess would explain, why people would want to see the footage of him.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I guess it's wait and see until we get more updates on that, right?
Yeah, we don't really have any updates. The only, I guess, I don't know if it was in our initial story, the new piece of information that we have is just we've confirmed, my coworker Kevin actually confirmed with Idaho State Police that they're not handling the investigation, which sometimes Idaho State Police has on a memorandum where they do some investigations at IDOC, but it is being handled, it looks like, as an internal investigation. So.
All right, thanks for the update. And Alex, I want to continue with prisons just a little longer.
Yeah.
You've got a story of an Idaho prisoner who died in an Arizona prison. Do we know what happened?
Yeah, so the initial kind of facts and information is still pretty new, and we haven't learned too much yet. But what we know so far is that a 38-year-old man who was in custody at I think it's Segura Correctional Center in Eloy, Arizona, he died what appears to be some kind of like prisoner on prisoner assault, some kind of altercation. We don't know if it was a fight or if he was attacked, and if it was several people. We just don't know those things yet. But yeah, he unfortunately was found, I think, around 8:30 in the morning their local time, and by 9:15 a.m. on Wednesday, he had been pronounced dead.
Wow. And I was interested to read that we've had prisoners in that facility for a while now. I think I read in your story for the past 5 years at least.
Yeah, and it goes beyond that. We've kept people in prison in a private facility, I think, for years before that. I don't know the exact date, but about 5 years ago is when we transferred to the Arizona prison. So it's through Core Civic, which is a private correctional center company, and they're one of the largest in the country. And so yeah, we house about, I think it's about 400. I'm still verifying the newest numbers, but from what our prior reporting and IDOC's website and stuff says, it's about 400 men are incarcerated over there. And yeah, it's been going on for the last 5 years.
And you found some complaints against this prison, is that right?
Yeah, and in honesty, I just kind of did some Googling and some searching. I had heard about some of these things in the past, and obviously when this news broke, I read about it a little bit more extensively. It's a lot of reporting by the Honolulu Civil Beat in Hawaii, because that prison also keeps it's a 2,000 person facility, and so there's also men from Hawaii and Montana that are being kept there because they also have some overcrowding issues. And the Honolulu Civil Beat has just done extensive reporting on all the issues kind of that it seems like that prison is dealing with. Their ACLU has actually called for a federal investigation of the prison last year after a prisoner died. There was another prisoner who was stabbed, and there's also been allegations of drugs and other kinds of things kind of coming into the prison. And a correction officer was actually arrested as well. So there's been quite a few complaints.
Wow. And so we're still trying to wait and see to find out, who he was and anything else, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Emma, you did, to call this a deep dive would be not doing this justice. The State Department of Education has been investigating the Soda Springs Special Education Program, and you really jumped into this. How did all of this investigation start? Were there complaints? How do we get into this?
Yeah, so there were at least 4 complaints by individual students or about individual students and their from their families to the Department of Education. And then the Department of Education chose to open their own systemic investigation, which is something the department can do when it sees that there might be a larger problem than just these 4 individual cases.
Gotcha. And the department says, according to their report, there were issues at the elementary, the middle, and the high schools. Give us an idea of what we're talking about. What were the concerns involving the special ed program?
Yeah, so this mainly has to do with a lack of training and being short-staffed. So the service providers for special education students, which means teachers and paraprofessionals largely, didn't have the necessary qualifications in some instances before they started caring for students. They also weren't correctly, likely due to that lack of training and mentorship and qualifications, implementing students' individual education programs or IEPs. And the IEPs then weren't in effect properly. So the students weren't getting the services they needed, and those things weren't being documented in the students' files as well.
Gotcha. And you mentioned this is according to the report, sounds like an issue of training and staffing as opposed to something like outright negligence. Didn't the report say they did the best they could with what they had to work with?
So the report's really specific that the paraprofessionals and the teachers who were interviewed seemed to be doing the best that they could with the supports that they were provided. The report really lays the blame on the district for not hiring enough staff and not properly training the staff that they did hire, not providing mentorship. I think a really good example is that there was a person who used to be a paraprofessional who was a first year teacher in a special education classroom who wasn't receiving mentorship and then was tasked with training the paraprofessionals in their classroom. So the report kind of lays the blame on the district for not providing those necessary supports to those teachers and paraprofessionals.
So what does Soda Springs, the district, need to do to fix the problems outlined in the report? I think I read they need to have an action plan by today.
Yeah, so basically how these work is the state opens a systemic investigation. It reviews files, it makes findings, and then the school district, in this case Soda Springs, has to complete over the course of the next year a report, a corrective action plan. So they have to work with the State Department to make sure that um, they're submitting training outlines and protocols. They have monthly check-ins. They have to document their hiring efforts each month. So really trying to get up to the correct staffing levels, those kinds of things.
And there was a lot of job turnover that the report found. And I have to think that staffing at schools, we've heard about it as a constant problem in Idaho, especially in rural areas. I mean, Soda Springs is in a rural area. It can't be easy to get certified, special education teachers there.
Yeah, so staffing has really been a huge issue in many Idaho schools, especially when it comes to special education. Um, Soda Springs had two open elementary special education positions, a high school position open, and the district special education director left at the end of last year. So they had to replace all those people and then some. And so, yes, staffing has been a huge issue, and really just all of special education funding and staffing has been an issue in the state. Last legislative session, Superintendent of Public Instruction Debbie Critchfield had multiple proposals to kind of address that funding gap. It's about $80 million, which that's the difference between what districts are currently spending on special education services versus the funding they get from the state and federal government, which is a lot of money. And so I'm sure this legislative session, that again will be a big issue for Critchfield really wanting to address that funding gap. And I think, Soda Springs didn't talk to me for this story, but I do think it's interesting. Their superintendent did say at a post-legislative session meeting earlier this year that they can't meet the needs because of a rise in special education, students needing special education services. And he said that they're going to see advocates and lawyers stepping into the process and that school districts are going to suffer because of that.
Wow. And I can't see Soda Springs as being the only place that's struggling with this. Yeah, fascinating story. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. Emma, thank you very much. And Drew, I want to talk about some aquatic plant monsters that are playing havoc in your neck of the woods. And I want to start with a cyanobacteria outbreak on Lake Cascade. How'd I do?
You got it right. You're right on.
Okay, so what's going on with this particular plant monster?
Yeah, so this cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, if you prefer the brevity thing, I suppose, is well, it's algae, and it's a what's known as a harmful algae bloom. It produces what's called these little cyanotoxins, and that is actually the part that's harmful. And so essentially, when water samples detect, a certain threshold of these cyanotoxins, the state issues a health advisory. And so that's what's happened here, specifically in the Van Wyck boat ramp area of Lake Cascade. Um, the we'll see what happens from here. This is not totally new for Lake Cascade. There was a health advisory last year in place for about a month, from the middle of October until late November. So it's not new, but it is news.
It is news. And I think you reported there are 9 of these advisories for the blue-green algae around Idaho as we speak. And we complain about it because it closes things down, but this can be fatal, right? It can kill dogs. It's killed cattle at Lake Cascade, you reported?
Yes, it has been known to it is especially harmful to pets and children, livestock. There was, I believe it was 2021, a dog downstream in Jim County on the Payette River that died from consuming water infected with these cyanotoxins. And then way back in the 90s, I can't remember if it was 93 or sometime in there anyway. Uh, there was, I think it was 33 cattle
Oh,
that
man.
died from drinking water out of Lake Cascade that was infected with one of these harmful algae blooms. So absolutely. I mean, for most, for you and me, if we were to go swimming, we might have an itch, or if we drank the water, we might get sick. It probably wouldn't kill us, but it wouldn't be pleasant nonetheless.
Right? Ugh. Is there a way to treat this? Can't we, I don't know, nuke it with chemicals or something?
Well, it's almost more of a preventative type of thing as opposed to a treatment. You can do chemical treatments of it after the fact. You could also certainly remove it. It kind of it first of all, it looks a little different depending on the bloom. It has a couple different appearances, I suppose. I guess the telltale is the blue green coloration. But it can look like spilled paint or foam or kind of scum or like a matte. So it takes different forms, and you could physically remove those. That would be one way. But typically, the approach the state has taken is simply it's a waiting game. We'll wait on conditions to not be quite as favorable for one of these outbreaks. And just to be clear, they're driven by warm waters, by nutrient-rich waters, and so in Lake Cascade, which is really a reservoir, both of those things are heavily present.
Right? Oh, and we get these every summer. We talk about, the blue and green algae, it's closed something down. Oh, that's a bummer. I can't go there. But I thought it was interesting. Your story talked about the financial impact that this can have, especially, for, as we've said, it's the tourist recreation season.
That's right, and we don't have hard numbers on this. I spoke with the Valley County Soil and Water Conservation District. They have been heavily involved in Lake Cascade water quality monitoring efforts over the years, and do some work as far as kind of those prevention projects that I mentioned. Things you can do to kind of keep phosphorus specifically and other nutrients from entering Lake Cascade, and in turn reduce certainly the likelihood and the severity of these blooms when they do happen. But from the financial standpoint, yeah, they estimate that Lake Cascade generates somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million per year
Wow.
from all the various different types of recreation, boating and swimming and ice fishing, and I mean, you name it, right? And so any sort of, I mean, you don't want the stigma of water quality issues, bottom line. We don't know, how many dollars does that potentially put at risk. I don't have those numbers, but it's not rocket science, right? Like we'd like to have good water quality. People want to go on vacation where the water's fine, right?
Yeah, yeah, where it's not gonna, make your pet sick.
Right.
The other aquatic plant monster, and that's my term, that you've written about is milfoil, and apparently this has become a real problem on Payette Lake. So remind us, what is milfoil?
Yeah, so Eurasian water milfoil is probably one of the most common aquatic invasive species, invasive weeds in the United States. It is known to have populations in every single state except for Wyoming and Hawaii.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's an ongoing battle in a lot of places, but here in Payette Lake specifically, um, it's been a battle for a little over 25 years now.
Wow.
And here in recent years, it has reached a point where the Idaho State Department of Agriculture has concerns that um, if left unchecked, it's kind of like a long vine-like plant. It grows in what's called the littoral zone, which is really just the part of the lake that sunlight penetrates, and so up to about 35 feet deep. But essentially, it grows in a ring around the lake shoreline, and if left unchecked, will become so thick that it will penetrate the surface of the water and kind of create a mat on
Hmm.
top of the lake, and it's been known to clog up propellers and basically render areas completely inaccessible. Um, and so that's kind of what we're up against right now is, this infestation that's existed for a long time, that's been being managed for a long time, is all of a sudden reaching a point where there's concerns about, do we need to take more drastic steps to keep this from happening?
Like nuking it with chemicals?
That's one idea.
So what's the good? What's the bad on that?
Well, and that's kind of the great debate. So the Idaho State Department of Agriculture, they took over control of milfoil management in Payette Lake from Valley County in 2022. Historically, the county favored using what's called mechanical removal, which is really just using a team of divers, and they go down and they'll either hand pull these weeds, or the way I like to think of it is there's almost like a vacuum cleaner type of tool that they use that sucks these plants up and basically bags them. Because the important thing to realize about milfoil is that you or I could be swimming in the lake and kick through some milfoil and break a little piece of it off, and that little piece is going to drift away. It's going to settle someplace else, and it's gonna sprout a new plant. So it's quite prolific. I mean, it really, every time it breaks, it generates a new plant. It's incredible, really. Um,
Mm.
and so that's kind of that's the battle. And as far as the good and the bad of chemicals or no chemicals, I mean, from the state standpoint, chemicals are the most cost-effective way to treat this thing. I mean, it's expensive, right? To hire a team of divers, it's time-consuming. It takes much longer than applying these herbicides. Um, and so that's kind of the main argument for chemicals. In addition to, I suppose, you can really take out large swaths of it and dense swaths of it probably better than you can with a mechanical removal operation. The flip side is, and this is kind of the reason that so many people had so many concerns about the state's plan to use chemicals this summer, which by the way they called off because of this opposition. Um, is that at this point in time there are several reliable pesticides, chemicals that are used across the country to fight similar infestations and other lakes, ponds, rivers, you name it. And so this is not, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here in Payette Lake. And while with most of these chemicals, there's no known um, dangers or harmful effects to humans that we're aware of at this point. I think the point of the opposition is that you always find out later, right? You didn't know it was bad then, and then 30 years down the line, oh well, gosh, we shouldn't have done that. Look what it did. And so that's the concern, is kind of, we think we know, but do we really know?
Right? And nobody wants to pour chemicals into your lake. I mean, that's an obvious. I thought this was interesting. One of the Valley County commissioners is thinking about buying a couple of special boats to basically zoom along and rip it up. Is that is that correct?
Well, and so that is loosely correct.
Okay.
Maybe not zip along. These boats, they actually kind of look like, to me, they look like a floating tractor.
Oh,
and they
nice.
have different bucket attachments and rakes and things that you can swap out, including a specific attachment for milfoil harvesting. These boats are used in other states. The company I was looking at, and I don't know if this is the specific model that the county was looking at. I was just poking around online myself looking. There's a company out of Florida that produces several different models of these types of workboats. They did not have prices on their online models. I'm not aware of what they go for. It sounds like they're all mostly custom builds based on what you need. But I'm sure it's not cheap.
Right, and it's not a cheap problem, no matter what you do to it. If only we could convince, if this were seaweed, you could harvest it and then sell it, for salads. But I don't know. That's a tricky issue. So I guess let's wait and see what happens.
It is, and that's where the ISDA's, they're in a rock and a hard place, right? Because they're responsible for lakes and rivers all over the state. They're not just focused on Payette Lake. And so for us here in Valley County, that's nearest and dearest to us, and we want to put everything we can into this problem. But ISDA has to say, well, wait a minute, we've got, how many other lakes that we have
Mm,
problems. We've got quagga mussels to worry about down in the Snake River. There's
mm,
only so many dollars to go around, and that's kind of the crux of the debate right now is how do we use them best.
okay. Alex, this story is a tough one. It's a tough one to hear. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was a tough one to write about. It might be a
Yeah.
little disturbing for folks, so just I'm going to throw that out there first. Can you tell us about the murder of an 18-year-old Caldwell woman? What happened?
Yeah, this was definitely a tough story, Sam. So I guess it was on Monday. A 18-year-old woman, teenager, however you want to describe her. 18 is really young. Her name was her legal name was Hope Cornish, but her family knew her as Onyx, and she unfortunately, according to law enforcement and some court documents, was shot and killed by her father, Delbert Cornish, in Caldwell.
And, I heard about this because there was a report about the son who came home and
Yeah.
found his father inside with a gun. And the police came and surrounded the house.
Yeah, so or Onyx's younger brother, he's about 15, I think. He came home after school on Monday, and his father was kind of in the house and had asked him, how was your day? And this is all according to court documents, just to preface. And he kind of asked him like, how was your day? And then he says, I killed your sister. And
Ugh.
the kid was like, of course, confused, and the father tried to get him actually to go into his sister's room. And there was actually a bit of a struggle. The teen said, obviously he didn't want to do that and tried to get away, and his dad pulled out a gun. There's also, according to the report, the dad potentially shot into the floor. And eventually the kid was able to, get out of the house after he actually was, during a struggle, took the gun away from his dad and then threw it on the ground and ran out and called police. And that's when the Caldwell Police Department showed up and surrounded the house. And, they initially didn't realize that Delbert had actually fled from the house. So they surrounded the house and were trying to get, him to come out. And then once they realized he had actually taken his brother's car and fled to Mountain Home, where his ex-girlfriend lived, they ended up going to the house, and that's unfortunately where they found Onyx.
And then he was arrested in Mountain Home. What did he say when he was picked up by police?
Yeah, so according to the reports, he had quite a bit to drink that day, and it seems like he had just been, I don't know if he's going through some mental health issues, some other stuff going on, but when he got picked up by police, without after he was read his Miranda rights, he was informed that anything he said could and would be used against him in a court of law. He pretty much confessed to the crimes on several occasions. He told the corporal from Mountain Home when he picked him up and got him in the police car, or once he sat him down in the interview room, and then he told the Caldwell detective who did the interview on him. And he admitted to doing it, and he actually spoke about how his plan for the day was to kill both his daughter, his son, and himself.
Oh, man, that is just.
Yeah.
So we're going to wait and see. He might face a trial. We don't know.
Yeah, we'll follow the case through the system. Obviously, he's despite the fact that he's obviously admitted to law enforcement, all that needs to be proven in a court of law, and there'll be challenges, I'm sure, from his defense attorneys. But he'll have his next hearing on September 3rd at the Canyon County Courthouse. And depending on how it goes, he can either face a trial, take a deal. We'll have to just kind of wait and see.
All right, tough case. Okay, Drew. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Time is hard on Friday. Let's stick with the water theme. It's August. There are a lot of water sports going on in Valley County. There's overcrowding because we've got more and more people trying to enjoy those sports. And now there's some talk about new boating opening up, maybe new restrictions, maybe new places opening up to boat. What's going on?
Well, so Valley County's cracking open its waterways ordinance, which sets regulations for all the navigable waterways here in the county, namely Lake Cascade, Payette Lake, the North Fork Payette River, Warm Lake, and even a lot of the alpine lakes, those high mountain lakes. In any case, it sets things like no wake zones on the lakes and sections of motorized versus sections of non-motorized and all kinds of things like that. And so these rules were adopted in 2020. They've been on the books since then. And now, here at the 5-year mark, the county is cracking it open and taking a look at potential changes. This was kind of sparked by a request that the county received from a group called the Western Whitewater Association, which is kind of a power boating interest group, a mini jet boating interest group. They're interested in seeing a section of the North Fork of the Payette River open to motorized use. So currently, at the Tamarack Falls Fishing Bridge, right there before, if you're going to Tamarack Resort, you would turn left onto West Mountain right after you cross that bridge there. That is currently the boundary. There's no motorized use on the North Fork arm of Lake Cascade north of that bridge. So they would like to see that opened up to essentially Payette Lake, the dam on the North Fork at Payette Lake. That's what Western Whitewater would like to see. Whereas the county is interested in looking into some new motorized restrictions for other parts of Lake Cascade that don't currently have restrictions. So there's a couple different proposals going around. We don't know exactly what will come forward. The county's planning to have a firm proposal this fall, but that's kind of the 10,000-foot overview.
Right. And we've talked, in the past about wake zones on the show. I know there can be, concerns about motorized boats in some places. But doesn't this all come back down to the overcrowding? We've got just a lot of people who want to use a limited resource. There's only so many places to put your boat in.
Well, that's really just it. And how do you prioritize, which use, gets preference? I mean, I think it's the same thing we see on public lands, and there's a balance to be struck. I'm a backcountry skier, and I would like to see all my favorite lines, untracked by snowmobilers. But the reality is that snowmobilers have every right to the public lands as well. And so this is, I think, a similar situation where how do we ensure that these different user groups maintain this access that's so important to all of us.
Absolutely. More details in the story. Drew, thanks for covering it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show.
And many, many thanks to our Reporter Roundtable today, including Drew Dodson, reporter and editor for the Valley Lookout, Emma Epperly with Idaho Education News, and Alex Brzee with the Idaho Statesman. They all very kindly gave up their time for us, and we're going to link back to their reporting on our website after the show. Check it out, boisestatepublicradio.org.
I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.